Good evening, everyone, and I'd like to welcome you to our keynote lecture, which we are all very much looking forward to. And again, I want to express a welcome to everybody here in person and also those attending virtually. There's no way I can completely encompass the magnitude that is Dr. Fayza Haikal. And no biography can give her proper justice. But to sum in brief, Dr. Fayza Haikal is Professor Emeritus from the American University in Cairo, where she has trained generations of Egyptologists, including myself. Before that, when she was at Cairo University, and indeed one can say that there are almost no Egyptologists in Egypt who have not been touched by her teaching, either directly or through the chain of scholars who have been trained by her. Dr. Haikal holds many degrees from Cairo University and Oxford University. She was one of the first women Egyptologists who is an Egyptian to work in Nubia. And in fact, it might have been one of the few women in general to have actually worked in Nubia. She is also one of only five, she's the fifth person to receive, since the creation of the International Association of Egyptologists, to receive the lifetime honorary membership title. Dr. Haikal is a world authority on Egyptology, particularly language. And aside from language, one of her other great passions in Egyptology is continuity of traditions and links between the past and the present. Ancestor worship, in whatever shape or form, is something that epitomizes this continuity. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Haikal and enjoy what should be a very exciting keynote speech. Welcome, Dr. Haikal.
Thank you so much for your introduction. Thank you, Louise, so much for your introduction. That's very kind. I'm very pleased to be talking to you in spite of all the lights that I cannot see you. But this topic is a very, very long topic, very important for Egyptians and for Egypt in general. But I have a feeling that there will be, having looked at the program, that there will be a lot of people who are going to talk about a lot of details, points in particular in details. What I am planning to show you tonight is something a little bit different, because I shall give you a quick aperçu of the whole civilization of Egypt, how ancient Egypt transferred and influenced modern Egypt, and how culture is a chain. You know, you cannot just start from nowhere. There is always something behind you that you are continuing. And this is exactly what I would like to stress upon here. And there will be a lot of slides that I will show you very quickly, because there are too many and the time is a bit limited. So I apologize for that, but it's not my fault, it's the fault of time given to me. So thank you very much for your attendance, and I'm just going to start right now. So I'm beginning where I should really end. That is to say, what is not so very important for the Egyptians. Sorry, let me get used to that first, because I don't understand how it functions. Yeah, no? Okay. Definitely do not understand how it functions. Anyway, we are talking about the adoration or veneration of the dead in Egypt. And there are many kinds of dead in Egypt, and it depends on their social class. And if they are royal or non-royal, it makes a very, very big difference, and you will show. The afterlife of the royalty is very different from afterlife of human people and ordinary people, and I will show you that immediately. But before we go into that, what you see here is something which happened starting from the Old Kingdom, which is not very commonly known, and this is why I wanted to start with it, because it's a little bit newer. This is the idea of people who can afford it in order to have, to count on their children and descendants to take care of their cult in the afterlife and make sure that that they they need all that they wanted. The people who could afford it had a different system, and this different system is very interesting because it shows the trade between Egyptians and the gods, and there is a kind of relation. You know, they are offering something to the gods, so that the gods give them back something. In this particular case, these people, instead of counting, as I'm telling you, on their children, they hire or pay a temple. They give him land and services, etc., and so that the temple priests itself, they will take care of their cult. They will present them offering, and they will be at the same time in a sanctified place, so they will get all the benefits of a sanctified place. This started happening in the Old Kingdom, 5th dynasty, and it is known from the 5th dynasty, but it continues. So, for example, the Ni'am-Khka, from the 5th dynasty, is giving a donation to the temple of Hathor near Menya.
Can you raise the mic a bit? Just make it closer to you. The mic.
So I have to do that?
Yeah.
Okay. So this system is fine-tuned later on by the Middle Kingdom Foundation, by Jafai Hapi in Asyut, to the temple of Anubis and Upuat, or that of the other donation, the nomarchs of the nome of the hair, and their donation to the temple of Thoth. This kind of donation developed and lasted until modern Egypt. In the Coptic period, for example, a certain physician called Foibamon made a donation to a monastery in Oxyrhynchus to allow his corpse to be buried inside the temple. So the importance for him, it was, he made a donation because normally private people would not be inside the monastery or inside the temple. Here he wants to be in the vicinity of the god, so this is what he's doing. And then later on, later on here you have also, this is Jafai Hapi that I was talking about. And later on, this guy is going to be sanctified because he will receive visitors who left a lot of graffiti in his tomb. In the Islamic period, we still had that, and there was the same organization which was working for both the Coptic and the Islamic donations. And I don't know, how do you go down in here? What is my guide? Because I want to tell you, for example, this Coptic agreement had a very special name, was Fora, and there is another name for the Islamic and Coptic in the Arab period. Anyway, this is, according to Shafi Alam, the origin of funds that we have now all over the world. So it started like everything started in Egypt. عايز ينزل قدام يطلع ينزل. Okay. Yeah, so the Islamic donations were called rizqa ihbasiyya, which means in Arabic, blocked subsistence, means like a foundation to help important member of the religious clergy to have a better life. So the foundation started in Egypt very, very long ago. Now, I was telling you that there is a very big difference between the afterlife of a king and the afterlife of a private person. But in any case, in both cases, they have to have a place where they are buried and a place where they are worshipped. So in the pyramids, all pyramids are a complex of more than just the pyramid, which is the tomb. And then they have a temple adjacent to the pyramid, and this is where the mortuary cult is done. In the Old Kingdom, you had an ascending corridor and another temple by the valley, but this was not the case anymore later on. Later on, when they were in the Valley of the Kings, where you did not have a pyramid anymore, there was a different part. The memorial temples where their memory would be worshipped was a little bit away from where they were buried. So you have here the temple of Hatshepsut, you have here the Ramesseum, so just to give you an idea of the things that we have. Now, this is the private tomb. I'm going fast to show you that in the private tomb, the kind of scenes that you will have are scenes, no, sorry, this is the royal tomb, excuse me. These are the royal tombs, so the kind of scenes that you have in royal tombs are related to the afterlife of the king as the sun god. He merges with the sun god when he dies, and when he dies, he has to, the sun god, and the king being the sun god there, has to be, to die with the sun, to set with the sun, and to have the night to enlighten the other world and enlighten the dead people so that they can live in the other world, and then they die when he has passed, and then he reappears in the east and he enlightens the world, and there is the regeneration of everybody in this cycle. And you can see that, for example, here you see he's in a boat, and he is, this is the solar boat, and he is one of the members in the solar boat. So it is completely different, therefore, from what we see in the private tombs, because I'm showing here a private tomb. This is the tomb of Miraruka. And in the private tombs of the Old Kingdom, and it's the same thing all the way through, they have very, very little religious scenes. They are essentially daily life scenes, what they did in their life, what they did in their estates, and how they receive offerings in front of the statue of the deceased, etc. So it's completely different. But they too have a place for the visitors, which is the upper part of the tomb, while they are buried into underground. The body is in the underground, and there is a saying, may your ba, that is to say your soul, be in heaven, your body in the ground, and your memory, your good memory, upon earth. So this is the best wish that you could do to the people. So the upper part of the tomb, which was where they were not, is where the visitors, the family would come and visit them, and even see, remember all the nice scenes, that daily life scenes, and banquets and things like that. All this continued until the 19th century, and then after that, after the 19th century, after the Ramesside period in particular, they began to have gods in their tombs, which they did not have before, the private people, I mean to say. Now, it is something very important to know, because this was my introduction to what you begin to do when people die. I am going to focus now essentially on private people, not at all on royalty, because as I tell you, they are gods and they become the sun gods. So, and it's a completely different story, which have nothing to do with what I'm going to tell you, which is the influence on the culture of ancient Egypt, daily culture on modern Egypt. According to Max, ordinary people became divinized as soon as they died, and they received the rituals of mummification, embalming, etc., which is supposed to be done usually by the god Thoth, who is the god of magic and knowledge, and the god of the moon, and god of many, many things, and he grows into importance throughout history. But anyway, these rituals, which are done at the moment after mummification and during mummification, are called sahu. Sahu means to cause the person to become a spirit in the afterlife. And spirits are also divine. However, the divinity has many degrees. There are the great gods, there are the small gods, there are spirits, etc. So, but they are divine, and therefore they are sacred, and they receive veneration. The tomb as well is sacralized, and the people come and visit them in their tombs. This is accompanied by other rituals which are made at home, and I will speak about this a little bit later. Now, the lecture I'm giving you now is about this interaction that we are going to have, family interaction between the living and the dead. Firstly, the funeral, and as I told you, the transformation of the deceased into a divine being, presentation of offering in the cemetery, and this presentation of offering in the cemetery has its counterpart in modern Egypt. And today, we do present, whenever we are going to visit our dead, we present offering. The only difference is that the offerings are not presented to the dead, because Christians and Muslims know that their dead do not need to eat. However, they are presented on behalf of the deceased in order for God to forgive his sins. And what is interesting is that the word for offering is called hetepu in ancient Egypt. In modern Egypt, it's the same word translated into Arabic, and we say rahma, ar-rahma. That is to say, what makes you, the misericordious God is Rahim, for example. So compassion, rahma is really compassion. And we have the same word. Also, when we are going out to visit the tombs, we say, in ancient Egypt, they would say peret. Peret means to go up. We say tala in Arabic, because most people here know Arabic, so this is why I'm telling you all the Arabic words. There are, even the offerings themselves have names. For example, shorek, a kind of bread which is special for the tombs, for tomb offering, that comes from ancient Egyptian shelek. And so on. We have very many like that, but time will not allow me to tell you all about it enough. So the vocabulary is very much the same. Then something very interesting, which I will show you in details in a moment, is the fact that Egyptians are, until today, writing letters to their dead. No, now they are not necessarily writing them to their dead, but they are writing them to their saints, the people they worship, whether in Christianity or in Islam. I don't want to use the word worship. I would say venerate, because worship is for God. So writing letters to the dead is a very, very Egyptian particularity, which started again in the Old Kingdom in Egypt, 6th dynasty, and then we are in the 3rd millennium before Christ. And it's still on today, writing letters to the dead to complain about something that happened to them, to ask for his help, etc. And this saint to whom they are addressed, these letters, are normally acting as an intercessor to the great God. However, he is a bit special because he, when people are making a prayer and asking for something, they always often want to present a nadr. A nadr is something that you say, you present to the saint. For example, you tell him, if you allow my kids to pass their exams, I will give you this and that. Now, if you don't give this and that, it's very dangerous, because the saint can retaliate and do something bad to you. So this is, until today, this is what's happening. So it's very, very important. And then there is something else which is also very important. It's called the appeal to the dead. I will show you all this in photos and images afterwards, but I'm explaining to you first so that we go faster. The appeal to the dead is something which is special also to Egyptians, and it started in the Old Kingdom again, and we have it until now. And in this appeal to the dead, the deceased is addressing the normal passers-by, and say, if you pass by my tomb, recite a prayer on my soul, because I'm a great man and I'm a very reliable spirit, etc., and I will help you in the other life. But if you enter my tomb, be careful. If you enter my tomb and you are not respectful to the scenes and the inscriptions that are there, I am going to wrinkle your neck, kill you, like a duck. And in modern Egypt, we say the same thing. We say if you see, until now, if you see a funeral passing by, you normally recite a prayer for the soul of the dead, even if you don't know him. And as I say, this is a good thing. And you do not usually remember the evil things that they do, but the good things that they do, because we always say, do not remember the bad things of the dead. It's not good for you nor for them. Well, we have also a number of things which are in the cemeteries, which are very similar to ancient Egypt. For example, we have cemeteries in Cairo, which are exactly like a house. They are like houses. And this idea comes from the idea from ancient Egypt, when they were considering that their tombs were exactly like the tombs of like a house. And they were even calling it the house of eternity, Perjet. So again, this is where we get it from, although neither Christianity nor Islam requires that kind of treatment at all. Actually, it's supposed to be a little bit erratic even. In the worship at home, we begin to see the worship at home in the New Kingdom, in particular in the village of Deir el-Medina, which is in Luxor. This is where we get the best documentation from. There were busts to the ancestor who was worshipped, and this is where the people from the houses, a little bit like, you know, the Buddhist shrines that they put in the house and they put food, etc. The ancient Egyptian had that, and they would put food for the deceased, and of course they would eat it afterwards or distribute it, and or again address prayers to the dead. Some of these dead became very important, and they became even sanctified, and we shall talk about it later and see all the analogies between the ancient pilgrimage and the Coptic pilgrimage and the Islamic pilgrimage in Egypt. They all came from the worship of Sokar Osiris in the late period, who is the god of the dead. So he represents the regenerated person. And all the festivals are a memory. And the memory, by remembering the people, as I told you in the first place, by remembering the people, you make them alive. So after that, we have the letters to the dead that we have mentioned already. And there are also the invocation of and the remembering of the dead. Well, one of the things that you can see, for example, on the slides, you see the sarcophagus, and which on the left-hand side, and a modern one, the ancient Egyptian and the modern one, which are identical. It's the same story. And what is interesting here is that the bier on which is carried is called in Arabic nash. Nash is a word which means yenash, which means to revive somebody who is fainted, for example. You try to bring him back to life, yenash. So they don't in Egyptian like to mention the word of death at all, because the word is very, very strong, and the word, when you pronounce it, is performative and creative. So something you can happen if you say a bad word. For example, somebody has a cancer. They don't want to hear that. They would say they would have the detestable thing. Until today, this is what we say. In ancient Egypt, they used to say the same thing. They would avoid to say, for example, there is a very interesting tale in which Pharaoh got sick, but they will not tell you, he got sick. They would say the enemies of Pharaoh got sick. We all know that in Arabic today, we say, Inshallah al-adu. It is if somebody is sick, you say, no, Inshallah al-adu. This is his enemy who is sick. And so on. I'm just giving you ideas as it comes. So here we have, while we have al-nash in Arabic, we have in ancient Egypt, Nebanch. Nebanch means the Lord of life. That is to say that the bier is the Lord of life, which is going to regenerate the disease which is lying on it. So we see the analogies, the ideas which are, again, continuing to survive in Egypt. Now, of course, you have the wailing and the body language, which is very similar to the extent, and the language and how you you mourn and how you call back the person who is dead and how you address him has been the topic of a research made by an American scholar, lady, I forgot her name right now, which is a comparison between the lamentation of the dead in the Sa'id, in ancient Egypt, in Upper Egypt, and the modern ones. So again, we can see these analogies in every respect. I'm showing you a photo of course, it's a modern painting, and I'm trying to also evoke en passant like that the impact of Egypt on the painting and art in the Western world. But this is an idea of the mummification, and this is the burial that you can see here. During the burial, of course, there is a lot of offerings that are done, but there is also a lot of wailing and a lot of mourning, and the wife here, you can see how the wife, after the mummification, is still weeping on her body, on her husband, excuse me, before they go into the tomb. Once they are in the tomb, it's no longer, you cannot see them anymore. And then we are coming to another thing which is typical of ancient Egypt and modern Egypt. You see, it's the offering of flowers and the offering of to the dead. So you can see here the ancient, and you can see here the modern, and you can see how people are buying flowers and going to present them, put them on the tombs of their beloved, or eating after they present offering. They share the meal that they are giving to the people around, the poor people in the Acropolis. They are also eating something on themselves. I remember in my childhood, they used to tell me, do that because like that you commemorate and you are, the deceased feel that you are there. So here are the houses, as I was telling you, how these are the entrance to the tombs. In the middle, you have an ancient Egyptian one. On the right-hand side, you have an Islamic one, Hosh al-Hajj Fulan. And on the left-hand side, you have the Christian Hosh. All this is in Cairo. So this is the analogies between the similarities that I was mentioning to you. Here you have the appeal to the living. And on the left, this is the Egyptian appeal, ancient Egyptian. On the right, you have, again, the appeal that I was mentioning to you in stele of Islamic period, Arabic period. So saying exactly the same thing I was mentioning to you before. These are the letter to the dead, the ancient letter to the dead. It's a story of a wife who is, of a husband, sorry, who is writing to his wife a letter, and he puts the way how to do that. You write your letter, and either you put it in a statuette, like in the case here, there is a box under the statue, and you can put the little roll of papyrus inside, or you can write it on a pot, and you present the food in the pot, so the soul will come to get the food, and then it will also get your letter. While this is the letter to the dead, you will have on the right-hand side the letter to the dead presented to Imam al-Shafi'i, for example. Everybody knows Imam al-Shafi'i here. This is one of the great a'imma, or great sheikhs of contemporary Egypt. And there is a very important book written on the letters to the dead in modern Egypt. But of course, all these things which are written in modern Egypt by other people have not been traced from ancient Egypt back to all the way to modern Egypt. And this is what I was trying to do. Now you have the famous bust I was telling you about, the bust of the deceased ancestor, and he's put in usually the entrance, the first room in the house, and you see the presentation of offering on the left side, and you see also this is the room where he or she are adored, and I say he or she American style, but when I forget to do so, but, because it's too new for me. Normally, when we say that, it means they, it's male and female. So now we have also what is called the Ach, Iker, and Re, who are like the ancestors, another form of the ancestor. Akh is the spirit, the beneficent spirit for Re, for the sun god Re, that the sun god Re has accepted him. So these two representations, whether the bust or the sun god Re, are a representation of the home worship of the deceased, usually either in 3 dimensions or in a stela, like you can see here today. And of course, these Akh, Iker, and Re are trying also to follow the boat of the sun god in their own boat, and in order to also to benefit from the closeness with the sun god. Now we are passing on to the saints. You know, there is a difference between ordinary people and then the saints. The saints in ancient Egypt were usually very important people because they were sanctified when they were doing their job well, because they were applying the mat, that is to say, the justice and balance and equilibrium, which is established by God when He created human beings. And therefore, if they do it well, they deserve to be treated as saints. But these people were selected by the king, who ordered for them to have a chapel, a hutka, and this chapel became like the temple. Visitors would go there, and the difference is from the cult of the ancestor. The cult of the ancestor is for a family, the cult of the saint is for the whole group of the community, and these people would have eventually also pilgrimage organized for them on the day of their death. These people, with time, their ascendancy is ignored, and they become more important if whenever their worship is or their veneration lasts for very long, because sometimes it lasts long, sometimes it doesn't. So according to the people, so they have, when they are at last long, they begin to have pilgrimages, and they begin to raise in rank until they become themselves semi-gods and even gods. And among these very important people are Imhotep, who is the architect who built the Pyramid of Zoser in Saqqara. So he was not only a wise person or a big administrator, a big engineer, but he was also a philosopher. Like antiquity, they knew everything. And here you have Haikal, who is one of the oldest, and Amenhotep, son of Hapu, and who are all different ages of priests. But I think that one of the most important, of course, is Imhotep, because he is remembered all the time by different people. For example, I'm quoting here, may the Wab priest raise your hands for you with libation poured on the ground, as it is done to Imhotep. You see, so Imhotep is the example, and for him, they remember him throughout from the 3rd dynasty all the way to the Greco-Roman period. He was remembered, and he became, from a human being, he became a saint, and then he became the son of the sun god Ptah, because as I was saying, their ancestry is removed, and they are giving them a divine ancestry, and then they themselves become absolutely divine, because he became a god called Asclepius, god of medicine, in the late period. And he was also a philosopher, and he wrote things, because that was the scribes who are honoring him, water of the writing pot of every scribe for your ba, O Imhotep. So it is when they are presenting the water to him and libation to him, this is very important. His importance as a sage is also recorded in the harpist songs, a kind of literature in Egypt, and in the papyrus Chester Beatty 4, and in this papyrus they mention the great authors whom you should always remember, and Imhotep is among them, but they are all people who wrote wisdom texts. So it's very important to remember that. And as I told you, Haikal, for example, whom I showed you, was venerated only in the Middle Kingdom, actually. By the end of the Middle Kingdom, it was finished. He started at the end of the Old Kingdom, and it continued until the end of the Middle Kingdom. While Imhotep started earlier and never ended, actually, until the end of civilization. And all these people who are sanctified, they have particular peculiarities. They are not simply sanctified, they are sanctified, and they acquire particular things which allow them to make miracles. They have what we call in Arabic karamat and baraka. So people like to touch them, to touch the place where they're buried or anything, and anything that is close to them, whether it's their sarcophagus or their clothes, anything that related to them, even their, if today when you say madad dirab, انظرلي, look at me, by the simple fact, look at me and see me, this already is a sign of benediction. So all these started in ancient Egypt, and it continued all the way until today. And they can move very, very quickly. For example, they can go from one place to another. They can appear in several places at the same time because they move so fast that you can't see it. So they really have a lot of things which are only divine things have them, and they continued throughout the religions, whether it is ancient Egypt, Christianity, or Islam. In Christianity, the difference between ancient Egypt is that it is the church who sanctified and divinized a person for the services rendered to religion or for their martyrdom or something like that. In Islam, it is a little bit different. We don't have saints in Islam normally. This is some particular people in Islam don't like this at all. For example, the Wahhabi of Saudi Arabia do not accept this idea. However, it is accepted by many people, by many other Muslims, of course, and Sufi in particular, because these people are very special and they have all these karamat and all this during their lifetime and after their lifetime. And they, I mean, who makes a saint in Islam is the people. Nobody decides who is going to be a saint or not. It's his behavior and his the way people perceive him that makes it amazing. For example, here you have, this is the entrance of Bab Zuwayla in Old Cairo. Near Bab Zuwayla, there is a Coptic saint who is there, and he is called Tawadros or Theodorus, and he is buried very close by, so people are going to him as well. And by the way, people go to, regardless of their own religion, they visit Christian and Islamic and Muslim saints, regardless of all religion, because all these people are good people according to the population in Egypt. So it's fine. I mean, if they need something from a saint more particular, for example, Sayyida Zainab, who is a granddaughter of the Prophet Muhammad, they will go because she is a kind of, she replaced somehow Virgin Mary, and she's like the Virgin Mary, and she replaced Isis, for example. She played the same role as all these goddesses who are very concerned with the family and the welfare of their communities. So when you pass from one religion to another, the same concept exists, only it changes figure, but it's the same personalities. So there is something also which is very interesting. It's the sanctity of a place, not only of a person. The sanctity of a place is very, very well demonstrated in Egypt by the Temple of Luxor, because the Temple of Luxor, who is one of the most important temple of ancient Egypt in Luxor, is part of a big compound. Karnak and Luxor are related because they're both temple of the god Ammon, and the resurrection of life with the cycle of the god, with the festivals of the god, but also the revival of kingship, the revival of nature, the revival of everything. So anyway, in the temple of Luxor, what is interesting is the sanctity of the place, because you have the great temple that we all know. And then we have in the great temple that we all know, we had a church. And then it still exists. If you go there, you can see the 3 steps. You can see the church, you can see, and then you can see the mosque, which is in the church. The church has been painted over with, they put panels on the wall in order for the Muslim to have a more Islamic setup, but you can remove the panels and then you will find the church under it. So it is so, the place is so sacred that all religions are there. And it's not the only one, by the way. We have very often crosses in the middle of temples, and we have, because they have been inhabited by monks, etc. So this continuity is very common. And whether in the Delta or in Upper Egypt or in Nubia, we have this, and sanctified places like that. Now, I'm going to talk about the Mulid, or the Festival of the Gods, and how they are similar. There are moments of the Mulid which are similar. There is what we call the night watches and prayers. Unfortunately, I don't have the equivalent images from ancient Egypt, from the festival of Sokarozir in the late period, but this is what they have. They pray all night. After they have prayed all night, and here you see on the prayers are, in the case of Islamic prayers, for example, there is a munshid, or a chanter, who recites hymns to the Prophet, and hymns first to he is introducing in his hymns the name of the wali, or the saint, the Islamic equivalent of the saint, and then he praises the Prophet, and then he praises God at the end. So it really one leads to the other until they reach God. And is in this zikr which they do, they have very beautiful voices, and there are different group of people who are like a brotherhood of different local Islamic trends, and they all have their organized the pilgrimage for different saints, and they have their munshid, and they compete because they all come as guests of a particular saint. All the confreries, all the brotherhoods come, and there is a kind of competition who has a better voice, who is doing a better enchant, and who is impressing people most. So you have this, and you have it, all the prayers which are so visible in Islamic thing, happens also in the monasteries whenever you have visitors to a particular saint buried in a monastery. And of course, in ancient Egypt, it was the same thing. There were prayers all night for the rebirth of Osiris and so on. And then there was, after this, there was the prayers, and then you have the prayers to the icon, and in icons in temples. Here you have St. George, and the Coptic population who visit the temple, when they visit they see the icon, they remember the whole history of the saint, and of course it's very important for them, and it guides them in their life, and so on. And then you have the visit in Islamic mosques, and they go visit the sanctuary, they visit the tomb of the saint, and they try to touch it, etc. Because, as I was telling you, the sanctity of the saint goes to his tomb, or even to the kind of chapel in which he is buried. And people, and this is totally anti-Islam, by the way, by touching things like that, and putting inside the letters they are addressing, to the saints, and they call them talbisa because they put them precisely in the frames, for example, of the icon, or in the frames of in holes in the walls, or in the shrine of the Muslim saints. So this is an occasion to ask, as well as to ponder over life and benefit from the history of these people. Then there is the procession, or the zaffa, as we say, and on the left you have the procession, and you have the sheikh who is in the middle, and in the right you have the Christian procession. They are carrying the idol, the icon of the saint they are visiting. Then this is the famous procession of the festival of Abu al-Hajjaj, the Islamic saint who is now having his mosque in the temple of Luxor. So it's exactly the same thing. Now, of course, these mulids attract a tremendous number of people who are supposed to be the guests of the person who is celebrated. And therefore, they have to be fed, and therefore, they have to find a place where they can sleep, etc. Very often on the premises themselves, either with the inhabitants, if they know anybody there. But they come from all over Egypt, and they come on regular basis. So they recognize themselves. There is a social life as well as a religious life in that kind of thing. Come back to feeding them. Some people bring with them food. There is a very, very beautiful book written about that in Arabic, which is called Saba Ayam, something, sorry, it will come back to me, who is relating a week of pilgrimage in Tanta for Sayyid al-Badawi, and how people are all so excited about it, and how they show their generosity by giving and feeding people, even if they have nothing to do with the organization itself of the Mulid, but the organizers themselves also are slaughtering animals, etc. Exactly like, for example, here in the middle of this, you see that this is a procession in ancient Egypt. You will find it in the temple of Luxor. It's the procession from Karnak to Luxor of the god Ammon, and in a particular festival. And they also, in the middle, you will find how they are slaughtering animals in order to feed the population who is coming to these festivals. And of course, the people are very happy, and all the tomb owners along the parcours of the procession, all the tomb owners benefit also from that, and from this food, exactly like it is done in modern Egypt. Now I'm going to show you modern Egypt, how after they slaughter the animals, because they are slaughtered for a saint, have the barakah of the saint itself. So their blood is sacred in a way. It's barakah, it's blessing, and people go and put their hand in the blood and put it on their face so that it gives them the kind. Today, I'm talking of today. Of course, they were doing the same thing before. And sometimes it's not very pleasant, but this is supposed to bring barakah, and they put it in their houses, on the houses. If you go to very popular places, you will find it on the house, on the door of the houses, etc. And here are the people doing this, putting the blood on their faces. And there is also different kind of food which is presented by the organizers of the Mulid. And this is seeds that Islamic and Christian, it's the same idea exactly. And then you have, this is Sayyida Zainab, the Mulid of Sayyida Zainab, which is not very far from here. And of course, it's all illumination, and there is a festive aspect of the matter. All this is very costly, as I say, and it requires a lot of organization and permit from the government to give them extra light, extra safety, extra everything. So it's not that easy to organize a Mulid. There are also personal visits, which are much easier, but the Mulid, you feel it more. So here you have the pleasure side of it. Of course, all the people who want to benefit from such a crowd being around come and with their toys, and the children are playing, swings, etc., and also a lot of food that people can enjoy. So this is about the Mulid, and then we have another thing which comes also from ancient Egypt, and this is the belief that the soul can appear in the shape of a bird, and the barbird. And this barbird is, there are many components to create the human being. There is the soul, there is the heart, there is the shadow, there is the name, there are many things, the heart, of course. But the barbird is what is closest to what I would call conscience of the person and consciousness. Because when a person faints, for example, he loses consciousness, it is like the bar has left him for a while. So you have this creature which is so very important and so spiritual and the conscious, as I say, who has passed during ages into becoming, even today, many Egyptians will tell you that these little birds, or particularly pigeons, are impersonating souls of humans. Even in Christianity, you have the Holy Spirit, which is represented as a bird, as you see him above the Virgin Mary and the child, and it is the Holy Spirit which appears here. And whenever you have visions of the Virgin, usually we have had visions of the Virgin here, particularly after dramas happening to the country, the Virgin appears in churches in order to...
Or like creating sense and everything into the Mediterranean. I have realized from what I've seen that practices you displayed here that come from ancient Egypt to modern Egypt, they're not only in modern Egypt, but also in other places in the Mediterranean and in other cultures. For example, I'm Greek, so I recognize loads of patterns there in what we do in Greece. So what do you think was the reason of that influence of the Egyptian way of dealing with this kind of stuff across the whole Mediterranean?
Not very sure I understand your question.
Yes. What do you think was the reason of the big influence of Mediterranean?
The reason is, as I explained in the very beginning, that nothing happens out of the blue. People are not conscious that there is this transmission. You have to search for it because you have to observe. You have to observe and see. People who are creating the culture are not observing themselves. They don't even realize what they're inheriting from the past. But by studying it, you have to freeze for a moment and observe, and otherwise you wouldn't notice. I mean, many people, I think I am among the first people who did this idea of tracing from ancient Egypt all the way to modern Egypt. Firstly, it's quite difficult because I am an Egyptologist. Basically, I don't know anything about, I did not know anything about Coptic and Islamic stuff until I started to do this continuity. But unless you really observe it, you will not, if Egyptians don't know that. And I made a point, my idea was to make a point to make them know where they come from, because it's always good to know where you come from. And also to realize how this culture has impacted not only modern Egypt, but it has impacted on the world, the whole world. But this is another lecture, of course. It's a very long story impacting the world with words that you use, with science that you use, with the Egyptomania, which is something which is not Egyptology or modern Egypt. It is the impact of science and the admiration of ancient Egypt, which led to copying it or transporting things from Egypt to Rome. It started in Rome, and you have this Egyptomania, fantastic, that can be fantastic, it can be very hideous also, that you see all over the world. There is nowhere in the world now where you do not have Egyptomania. and also, of course, where you do not have Egyptian museums. And these are because of the grandeur of the civilization. There's no museum in the world which does not have a department of Egyptian art and culture. And this department is usually the most visited in the British Museum, in the Louvre, in Turin, in Berlin, everywhere. The same thing in the United States. You will find that this is the most visited thing because it responds to us. We feel it, not us as Egyptians, but as human beings, because we are studying the study of human beings. We are studying the culture of human beings, and the human beings don't change that much. And when we are talking about the afterlife that nobody knows, we cannot really decide to change because we are not sure. There is an accumulation of belief which comes on top of each other, but without rejecting anything because we don't really know what's going on after we die. So we better keep what we know. So that's the idea. You're welcome. Any other questions?
Are there any other questions? I'm not seeing any on virtual. No other questions? Well, then, thank you so much for such a wonderful lecture, and thank you all for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you all with the continuation of the conference tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Hope you all have a good evening. Thank you.